everybody. Great to be here virtually at JP Morgan. I'm actually here in San Francisco because I live here, but I think most of you probably aren't. Would have been great if we could have been together in person, but here we are in the Omicron era, and unfortunately it wasn't possible. So I'm Nick Damiano, co-founder and CEO of Zenflow. We're a medical device company based here in the Bay Area, and wanted to talk to you about our journey as a startup going through the different phases, and especially how it ties in with non-dilutive funding and how we used our non-dilutive funding success to get ourselves through the various milestones that medtech companies have to traverse over the years. So I'll share my slides here. So just some background on Zenflow, who we are. So we were founded in 2014. We currently have 28 full-time employees plus some remote consultants around the country. We're based here in South San Francisco. We are developing a device to treat BPH, or enlarged prostate symptoms. It's a condition that affects almost half of people in the world. All men at some point, if they live long enough, will have prostate enlargement that leads to urinary symptoms. We've over the years raised over $60 million in funding from all different kinds of sources. We started with business plan contests back in 2014, and then since then have raised from VCs, angels, some debt deals, and of course grants. And we've used that to go out and do a lot of work in the clinic. We are currently enrolling in a big randomized study, and we've treated about 110 patients total in 6 countries on 3 continents over the years. Just a brief rundown of what the problem we're working on is. So for all men, as they get older, the prostate grows and eventually becomes this much larger bulbous gland that blocks off the flow of urine from the bladder. And then what happens is that they have obstruction while they're trying to void. They end up having frequent and urgent urination that has them getting up throughout the night to go to the bathroom and really disrupts their daily activities. It's a big quality of life issue that we identified, and found that patients were looking for a better solution than the drugs and surgery they've been traditionally offered. So we developed what's called the spring system. There's a spring implant. It looks like a spring. It's shape memory nitinol alloy that takes this shape in the prostate to just push back tissue and relieve the obstruction to have the patients feeling better quickly. And we've seen really good long-term results as far as relieving this condition over multiple years. And it's deployed in an office procedure through a flexible scope. So we have a system that's like a catheter, but you can see what's actually happening with direct visualization. And for the urologist, they just pull this trigger and the implant goes in gradually into the prostatic urethra. And our mission, so what we're trying to do here is to deliver better long-term results, as in symptom relief, and a better patient experience where it's a less painful procedure. They're not going to have a high rate of catheterization or adverse events after the procedure. And it's not going to be that painful, but they'll see their symptoms resolve quickly. And just to go through some of the history, so I'll go through where we've been and how the non-dilutive funding played into this. So my co-founder Shreya and I started the company out of the Stanford Biodesign program back in 2014. And once we left the university in the latter part of that year, we moved into my garage, into this dank and dusty corner you can see here. We were at the time called something different. We ended up rebranding as Zenflow in 2015. It was just the 2 of us. We worked in this not so nice office, if you can call it that. Really a small space without a whole lot of resources. We were a long way from our first patient treated, and we didn't have a whole lot of funding. We had a small grant from Stanford Biodesign and some other sponsors, and then a couple of business plan contests we won. That was all we had. And what we faced was a really difficult environment. So this is how, just some numbers on medtech funding from Silicon Valley Bank. You can see here that even when you get to Series A, which that point was many years off, you have to get through the seed stage, get some compelling early data to even raise a Series A round. And at that point, you can expect pretty low valuations. And some of these clinical areas, you can see the median valuation, something south of $10 million. And so you have to be able to spend efficiently to get to that point and create enough value that you can withstand a low valuation. Then you end up giving up a large percentage of the company. You can see here that giving up half the company in your Series A is not uncommon in med device. So it was a challenge to even get to that stage. And then also when we got to that stage, not to dilute the company too much. And then you face additional rounds. So it's rare for a company like us to just raise a Series A and get to market. You have to usually go through multiple venture rounds. All of them are quite dilutive. And you can see here that the valuation step up from the prior round tends to go down over time as companies get to the harder stages where there's a lot more expense, a lot more time pressure to get things done. And it gets to the point that between your Series C and D rounds, at least in this data set from a few years ago, it was on average a down round for all medical device companies. So it's really a challenge to thread the needle and get things done in a cost-efficient, time-efficient way to deliver enough value that you don't see these down rounds where the whole company's just diluted out of all their ownership. So here's our story, how we got through the minefield and where grants factored in. So in 2014, we came out of the university, started our first preclinical work in animals, cadavers, bench studies, typical starting point for a medical device company. We did submit some grants. One of them was an NIH phase 1 early on. We submitted to a couple other private agencies or smaller groups and didn't get those grants either. So we didn't get funded for NIH. We didn't get funded elsewhere and ended up having to rely on a little bit of investor funding from angels to get us through this stage. But we learned a lot about grants. So you do learn a lot from failure, which we then applied to future submissions. We then caught one of our first good breaks in early 2015, got into the Y Combinator accelerator. We were the first medical device company to be part of Y Combinator. It's the tech accelerator that I think has been the world's most successful. It produced companies like Stripe and Airbnb and Dropbox, not a whole lot of healthcare companies, although it is changing now. So that gave us some early funding. We then successfully piggybacked on that failed NIH grant to get a NSF phase 1 and 1B to get us some early funding and help us bridge a little bit further from the limited angel funding to a point that we could really raise a Series A round. We then went and on the back of some of our investor funding, got some very early first in human data. This is us training the first doctor to use the device. We tried to get a phase 2 on the back of our phase 1 from NSF. We weren't quite there yet. We probably didn't do enough diligence ahead of time and should have gone to NIH that stage instead, as opposed to NSF, which is what our program director at NSF told us. We likely could have asked that question beforehand. So we wasted some time and effort to submit that grant. But again, we did establish a foundation and learn some things that could help us get more success later on. As is often the case, we required some device iteration after the first in human. That went through 2017 and 2018 till we get into our next study. And fortunately, we submitted an NIH phase 2, which was successful at that point and really helped us fund through those phases along with our Series A round we raised in 2017. So again, the Series A, along with grants, helped us get there. We then went on to our second in human studies. This is us in Mexico, and then eventually we enrolled some patients in Australia for the study as well. We followed that up with another NIH phase 2, which helped us work on some of this device iteration. So NIH really helped us fund both the initial device design for our second in human study, as well as some of the iterations that happened between then and what we have now for our device. And so those iterations then, again, we found our device was working really well in most of the cases, but it could be better. And we went through another iteration cycle, which went through 2018, 2019, and 2020. We then, as we were getting ready for our pivotal study, submitted an NIH phase 2B to cover that. And we got our best score yet in any grant we had ever gotten. And then somehow didn't get funded, which was a bit of an unpleasant surprise, but nonetheless, we had investor funding that helped us through, and we also started thinking about other grant opportunities to get us through the next phases. And then we all know in 2020 what happened. The pandemic hit. We were lucky to get a few cases down in Australia before the pandemic, and then we were shut out of the clinic for about 8 months. We ended up going down and doing the 14-day hotel quarantine. This is me down there in the middle of my Australian hotel quarantine. I did 2 of those, one in 2020 and one in 2021. Not so pleasant, but you've got to do what you've got to do to get things going. We hoped in 2020 this would be over by the next year, and certainly by now, but as we know, this is what's happened. This is the world we live in now, where it's kept going through 2021 and now 2022. And recently, so continuing to identify different grant opportunities, we submitted a kind of a pilot program with NIH, a commercial readiness pilot that, we're very hopeful. I think we have a good submission for this, but again, trying to match the grants with things that are stage appropriate. We'll see how it goes. We just submitted this in early January. And, this seems like a lot, but this is only the start of it. There's actually a lot of other landmines that face med device companies along the way. We had to supplement this investor funding and our A funding with a Series B raise in 2021. We're now in the middle of this pivotal trial, which is a big randomized study across the US with a few international sites that we expect will last through 2023. Team building's always a challenge. You always need to make sure you have the right people and keep people motivated, keep them excited, enthusiastic about what you're doing. That's gone really well for us, but it's still never easy and requires a lot of effort. Then longer term, getting FDA approval, CE mark, other approvals, reimbursements, always a big challenge, commercial launch, and then scaling up your sales pipeline. Those are still major challenges in the future that we'll hopefully be able to leverage different funding and strategies to get past. And the good thing is this has produced positive results for us. So all this funding that helped us go and launch good, robust trials around the world, we've had really good improvement. This is the primary outcome for our device is what's called IPSS. It's a patient-reported symptom score, and we've seen really good improvements, more than 50% in most time points, which has been really great to see. When you stack us up against our competitor, we've looked really good. And so the standard of care in minimally invasive BPH is UroLift. They've done really well in the market. But you can see here in the first 3 effectiveness outcomes, we're looking really good against them. We have generally faster recovery for patients. We have a less painful procedure that requires less anesthesia. It's a less traumatic procedure. And as far as ability to go on to follow-on therapies, our device is completely reversible. So this kind of framing was really helpful actually for grants to show that this is what we have against the standard of care. It's really important to get the reviewers to get on the same page that if this works, if this grant work is done, then patients could have something that's really going to move the needle for them, if they're looking for a better, more effective, safer treatment. So just some things we've learned over the years about grants and the best strategies for getting funded. So one mindset we've had instilled in us since very early back in the Stanford Biodesign Fellowship is the basics of anything are a strong clinical need. So really defining what is the clinical need here, and then using that to drive your solution, not having a solution that's looking for a need, but have a need that drives you to something that is very well tailored with the need in mind. So that's how we started. We talked to lots of urologists and patients, did lots of clinical observation, found a really strong need, specified what our product would need to do to really make a difference in this market, and then use that to drive what our solution was going to be. And for grants, it's really important. They don't want technologies chasing needs. They want something that's designed to solve a specific need. Other than that, I think a lot of the lessons we learned at Y Combinator actually apply to these grants too. You can never be too clear and concise. I think a lot of people struggle with this. I definitely struggled myself trying to get that story really, really crisp over the years. And it's just important that we learn from our reviews, our summary statements from NIH, from NSF, that sometimes the reviewers just didn't get it because we didn't explain it clearly enough. And so we just kept refining that in every submission, make it clearer, make it more concise, and repeat the key points over and over again. So if they miss, sometimes you'll find they missed one thing you said somewhere in your grant, but if you say the important things over and over again, really hammer them in, then there's no way they can miss them. And then also there's sort of a trade-off between your possibility for success commercially and the ability to get grants. So it definitely helps to have something that's commercially feasible, that investors are interested in funding. That did provide some tailwinds for us. I think we did find at one point with our phase 2B for our trial, remember we got a great score but didn't get funded, is that it seemed like they had funded a lot of our grants. Maybe they didn't want to keep funding this project when they could fund other things. There's also some element of, I think, having too much investor funding. We just raised our Series B of 24 million. So, I think other companies might have been seen to need the funding more. So that's worth balancing, is just make sure that they understand the potential, but then it's worth considering that there could be such thing as too much success to where it could start coming down and decreasing your chances a little bit. And as far as the team, so these are largely academics that are reviewing these grants. They do try to bring in industry and other people that are experts in other areas. Great effort on the part of NIH and other agencies in doing that and diversifying their review panels. But you're probably going to face a lot of clinicians, a lot of academics in reality. So it helps to have PhDs, MDs in your core team. We didn't have a whole lot. I think we had one PhD out of 6 of us. And our PI, who was me, is not a PhD or MD, just an MS. So not essential. You can still get funded, but it does help. I think what does really matter is having the clinical experts involved. So we've always made it very clear in our grants that we have a lot of clinical expert support. So the top thought leaders in our field are often involved, quoted. They provide letters of support for our grants. We really keep them engaged. We had one of the leading KOLs as a co-PI for one of our submissions. And that really helps. A lot of people reviewing could be these clinicians. And if they see the names of people they respect in the field, then it's definitely going to help. And then also the program director or whatever the agency you're working with calls that person who's the equivalent of that. They're really an important ally in this whole thing. So I'd make an important point to have a relationship with that person, really get them bought in on what you're doing and engage them throughout the process, keep in touch, remain friendly with them because they can really help you. And then as far as the project plan, this is something that we've learned over the years. It's sometimes gone wrong and had projects that weren't as compelling to the agencies. We've learned to make sure that it's both really tailored to the solicitation. So you want something that is the kind of thing they would fund, first of all, but also that's work that's important to your company. You don't want to do something just because you can get it funded. It's got to align with your company missions. There's also a lot of things you're probably doing. If you have a startup in the healthcare field, you probably have a lot of different initiatives going on. You want to make sure that you find the work that most fits within the solicitation you're going for, and then also something that's going to fit within the project period and just things that you are pretty sure you're going to do. There's a lot of cases where plans change. I feel like every few months we have some big major surprise that pivots our strategy, but you want things that are low risk, that are things that if I'm submitting a grant for 2023, that it's something that I know I'm going to do in 2023 and feel like, there's minimal risk to that being put off or canceled. Also, as far as the budgets, I wouldn't go short on it. So we've always, if we can, if it makes sense, we try to max the budget out. We often have projects that cost more than the cap for the grant, so it's pretty easy to get there as far as the budget cap. So we've tried to find as much as possible to fit within the budget cap. It's what we've heard. We've never tried to go over the cap. I've heard you can get it funded, but it's definitely a lower chance than if you stay within the parameters they give you. So usually we go pretty much right up to the cap, but not over it. And then things you can succeed in. It's always good to take risks as a startup. I mean, that's what we do as entrepreneurs. But for grants, it is nice. They do like when you can go and meet your aims this time, and then next time you come back and say, hey, we did all the work we said we were going to do. We had good outcomes. You can have some surprises. I mean, it's never a sure thing. You might have something that didn't quite go right, and then you can talk about that and what went wrong, what you learned, and then how you pivoted. But it's good to at least be able to say that you did the work, you have the findings that you were looking for, or maybe some surprises, but you got it done. And so you're credible when you go into the next grant and ask for new money, for new aims, that you did the work last time. And then as far as keys to succeeding here, so I think one thing is you always want to be selling. Everything in a startup as an entrepreneur is really in some way selling. So just like you're pitching to investors, you really want to make sure that they understand why what you're doing matters and why it's big, why it's impactful, why it's worth funding. But that said, it's even more important with grant submissions to always maintain your credibility. Don't go off on too many limbs and make too many bold claims. In a grant, you want to keep it within what the data supports, and also maintain scientific rigor. So it's important that you, in your clinical work and anything you do, you need to have the citations, you need to have some logical reason, some data to believe what you're claiming. And then I think it all starts with the aims. So the aims of the project really drive what you're going to do. And by my strategy usually is starting with the aims. What are the key aims? What are the projects you want to complete at a high level? And then having that drive the rest of the work. So you want to make sure the aims are compelling. Maybe have people review those aims. People that are grant experts, send them to friends that have done well with these grants, or people that are involved with these agencies and review grants, and just get some feedback. And then use that once you feel really good about those aims to drive the rest of the strategy. And last thing, a little plug for FreeMind here. So we've submitted a few grants now with FreeMind. They've done a great job for us. We've had other consultants before that weren't quite as helpful as they were. So having a good consultant, and I'm sure there are others besides FreeMind too, but they've been really good for us, really increases your odds of getting funded, decreases your workload. So as an entrepreneur, your time is just so important, and these grants are incredibly time consuming. So they can really help you offload. It's worth paying the fees to offload that work and save your time for other things. And then a good consultant expands your opportunity set. This last commercial readiness pilot we submitted, we didn't even know about this opportunity. And then FreeMind came to us with that, and we submitted it. And I think it's a good, promising submission. So it's good to have somebody that can help you understand what opportunities are out there besides the standard kind of phase 1, phase 2 pathway. So in the end of this is us today, at least most of our team. And we're now 28 employees, a lot bigger office space. We're well on our way doing a pivotal study. We have 110 patients treated, and a good bit of funding, including some from grants. The grant funding looks pretty small compared to our investor funding, but it did come at these really critical time points where we were just short of our milestones or needed just a little bit to get some extra work done. So even though it seems small, the funding was strategically placed so that it was just really helpful whenever it came in. So yeah, that's all I have. Great to be here. Wish we could have done this in person, but enjoy the rest of your virtual conference. Thanks.